live in London with a fantastic guest, Sara Challice, who set up an amazing organisation called Wellbeing for Carers. And we'll get to Sara in just 1 second. Just a little bit of housekeeping. It's a live show. If you're listening to this on a Wednesday evening on the date I just suggested, it'd be great to hear from you. If you've got any thoughts or comments, you can call us. The number to call us on is 07 506 319 745. That's this phone here. And it'll go off and I'll get you live on air. So +44 if you're calling from outside of the UK, you can get us on WhatsApp to avoid the charges. It'd be lovely to hear from you. And also, we're streaming live on several platforms. So on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter via Periscope. So you can join us if you're on one of those platforms. You can sort of add some comments, and my amazing team, James and Jennifer, will pick up those comments and message them into me, because I'm pretty rubbish at trying to do two things at once. I can't look at these platforms and talk to people at the same time, because I'm a bloke. We can't multi-platform. We can't multi-task or anything like that. So it's not possible. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. Here we are. Hello, Sara. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me on today, Noel.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. How are things going for you? How's this? We just had these new announcements. Not quite a lockdown here in the UK, but some addition. I was saying to you just before the show started, is your drinking career over now?
Well, I do like to drink, yes, and I think many of us do. But I'm kind of behaving myself. Actually, I'm doing some kind of detox thing at the moment, which I might as well do. Let's be honest. Well, this is happening for however long. So, how have you
found this whole? I mean, it's been a slightly bizarre time for us all, but how has it been for you? Sort of this whole process, the lockdown and then lockdown, and how are you managing around all of that stuff?
I've been fine, actually. I live on my own. I say with the dog, actually, who's got a really loud bark. But so that kind of isolation, I kind of felt it a few times. But I've got some great friends. I use Zoom, Skype. I get myself out into nature. I do things like meditation and things like that. And I work from home. So I'm a freelancer designer as well as author and helping carers and the charities. So I'm really busy. And since my book's been out, I've been even busier helping with webinars for carers, telling my story and sharing my insight and knowledge. And it's been making a big difference for a lot of carers, so that's great. So I'm really
you maintain that sense of connection and purpose and sort of meaning in terms of what you do, which is fantastic, actually.
Even more so with it'd be good to be face to face with carers, of course, and I know for anybody who's caring, they're isolated at the best of times. I mean, I know I used to feel quite lonely behind closed doors, getting on with it. It'd be quite monotonous, caring, but now with everything that's happening, it's a whole nother layer of pressure. So my heart does go out to anybody caring for a loved one. You've got so much more to deal with, and if you're caring for somebody who's very vulnerable, very ill, and you've got that worry as well if you've got paid carers coming in or not, as the case may be. So there's a whole variety of things that are happening. And I was just going to say that because of the pandemic in the UK alone, there's another 4.5 million carers apparently, and which Carers UK have announced because of everything that's happening. So more and more of us are in a caring role at present.
And that's likely to be the case for some time to come, because the virus, even when people are surviving it, they've had the serious version of it and very significant medical intervention. There's a long recovery from that. But even if you haven't been in an ICU ward, the long tail recovery and I was just dealing with family today with the sort of post-viral fatigue that we're seeing in people who've had the virus, and so it's going to have a significant and long-term impact. So the whole issue of caring, being cared for, all of those types of dynamics are now with us front and center. And I think in particular because of some of the issues around care homes and their role within sort of infection management or not, as the case may be, during this time. So I think there's a lot of really pertinent conversations that we're going to be having tonight around all of that, particularly as we look at the continuation. I don't like to call it a second wave. It's not a second wave. We never got out of the first wave. It's just the
Not really.
natural continuation of the first wave of this pandemic, as cases rise, and as you say, this whole issue of the need to medically isolate people, protect them from infection, and what that means in terms of caring and caring for people and being cared.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, people in care homes, they're feeling isolated from their loved ones as well. But it's a very difficult time, and families wanting to go and visit them. And even during the lockdown, sadly, my mother-in-law, she fell and broke her hip. That's very tough. And she'd not been able to see the family as she could. And sadly, she did pass away. But luckily, they allowed my daughter, Lynn, to come in and sit with her. So she was there with her. But it's very difficult if you've got a loved one and they're poorly and they want to see you. So and this is going to continue. It's very hard for a lot of families.
Okay. James, if you're listening, I got a message from Jennifer saying there's problems with the audio. It's a live show, so we have to do this, Sarah. Jennifer, can you message James directly with it? But I'll just tell James. He says Sarah's loud and clear, but Noel seems to be turned down. Anything you can do to adjust? So I'm going to turn my gain up a little bit.
That's better.
There we go. Is that better? James has sorted it out. So there you go. Jennifer, with those little technical tips, can I suggest you send them messages to James rather than me? You sent it to the wrong person, but there you go. Evidence it's a live show, and evidence that at least one person is listening. Hi, Jennifer. Over there in not Australia, in California. Jennifer's on my team, and as I said, her job is to scan all the social media sites to see if anybody's contributing and what their contributions are. So California's been having it tough around this stuff.
Oh,
on their second lockdown. Well, they're just in between them at the moment. So Jennifer's been running around madly enjoying her freedom before it all goes mad over there again. And so good to have you with us, Jennifer. So yeah, I mean, we're going to the whole dynamic of caring has been questioned, really, and the whole the UK is quite odd and unique in some ways. Maybe not odd, but interesting and unique in some ways. The whole thing we do around care homes, for example, is not something that other countries tend to do.
No.
That whole issue is up for debate, and there were, of course, reviews that happened not long ago anyway around having an aging population and what that meant.
Yeah.
And so again, that's now in question, how we deal with that. I mean, I have to say, I've got some friends who are in their 70s, and it's just not pleasant at the moment. If you're in your 70s and upwards, it's quite a sort of challenging, frightening time at the moment.
Yes, which includes my parents, actually. My mum is open to that, not that she wants me to tell everybody, but there you go. So yeah, it is. The thing is to boost your immune system as much as possible and safeguard, shield, protect yourself, wash your hands. I know it's a bit laborious, it does take the fun out of life at times, but just being careful. And like I say,
one of the things I've done, and we've been joking a little bit about it, you're on a detox, but I've been very thoughtful about my health and well-being during this period of time. So I took up running during the lockdown because gyms closed. I've lost weight because I was overweight, and I was concerned about that. I'm in my 50s, so I'm not old by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm going in that direction, etc. So it's made me think very long and hard about sort of my lifestyle and how the adjustments that I can make. So there has been, for me, some very positive outcomes from this situation. It sounds like you've made some similar.
There's a lot of things we can do for ourselves. It's some things that I share with carers. A lot of us are in high beta brainwave state as well, which you know all about that, Noel, from your learnings. But a lot of us are living in the stress, that fight or flight response.
Yeah.
And for carers in particular, we see it as quite normal to be, you're comfortably uncomfortable. It's the way I describe it, actually. You're busy, kind of, there's one crisis after another, you're firefighting, and you kind of get used to that. And something I'd say with carers, we become entrained very quickly, which I certainly did, and I know carers that have, but that you're focusing on another one, to then start to focus on yourself, like putting that oxygen mask on yourself. You kind of feel guilty. It's like, how dare I go and take time out, have a break? How dare I have a jolly while my loved one's left at home? And I certainly used to feel very guilty, and Neil, would let me know that he wasn't too happy about it if I would be out sometimes. And it's difficult because your loved one is vulnerable and they want you there all the time. But you need me time, and we all need me time. And it's what helps to relax you, not just carers, but all of us. Finding healthy pursuits, a lot of us going out in nature. I don't think anybody can buy a paddle board within, I don't know, a mile radius. Apparently next door they were telling me, paddle boarding, bikes, getting out cycling. I think that's been a wonderful thing, actually. A lot of people have been out in nature. It's been a big boost in that respect. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. I've been spending every weekend out of London while I can. I'd like to sort of go back in time a little bit and hear a bit more about your story, if that's okay, and how it is that you are in this position now,
yes,
where you are sort of offering your experience and your insights to carers. So what happened to you? I mean, what's your story? How did you
well, for me, I mean, it kind of kicked off when I first came to London just over 20 years ago. I came from Peterborough. I came to live and work in London, and very exciting times for me. I was on the 26th floor of the NatWest Tower, with huge views over the city, and this was where my life was going to start, and very exciting. And whilst I was in the design team, within 3 days, as I was sat at my desk, in walked Neil, and he was the print supplier to our design team, and got to know him really well. He used to take us all out for lunch. We were having a great time, and he would ask me out, and we started dating. And I always enjoyed his company. Very oozed confidence. He actually told me he had never been to the doctor in 14 years. Which probably never the wisest thing to say, whatever happens. But anyway, he kind of saw me as the one. I kind of pushed back a bit and said, no, we can wait for a bit longer than that. But he'd been having kind of these side effects, and there'd been pins and needles down one side, and been having funny headaches, even slurring his speech. People thought that, when he was misdiagnosed for a while, actually, I'll be honest with you. But then there was one evening he just couldn't get off the sofa. Right. I got him to hospital, and just to check. I didn't think it'd be anything majorly serious, but sadly, when we got him there and he was had a brain scan, discovered that Neil had a large malignant brain tumour, which was a shock to us all because he'd been so fit and well. And I just looked at, I gave Neil a big hug, and in tears we said, I said, we're on this journey together, Neil. I hadn't been seeing him long, but I'd known him for about 18 months at that time. And I just remember thinking, don't worry, I'm here for you, not realizing for me what that would mean for the many years that followed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because life happens when you're making other plans, right, as John Lennon said. So so Neil had a big operation, removed most of the tumour, had chemotherapy, and 6 months later he was given the all clear, and we rejoiced in getting on with life and cracking open the champagne, and that was it. We carried on with life all that year. We were fine. Neil proposed to me the following Christmas, right. And we weren't going to be in any rush in getting married, but only a few weeks after he proposed to me, he was having those side effects again down the arm, brought his scan forward. But sadly, his hunch was right. The tumour was back, but this time it was inoperable. Right. And Neil did say to me, you don't have to marry me, even though he saw me as the one. But I said, what, stuff the cancer, Neil. We will make the most of what we have. Because I didn't want cancer to dictate our lives. I was kind of rose up against that, but not really, like I say, not realizing the impact it would also have on my life and what would happen over the coming years.
Yeah.
So we brought the wedding forward and saw it as a big celebration of all our friends and family. I was juggling, as many of us do. I was working in the city at the time still, whilst Neil, and then trying to get Neil for chemo each week. It was stressful. It was like spinning plates. And it was emotional. You have to be an emotional, physical rock, really, for your loved one. You know, it's your loved one who's ill. It's them that we're all looking to, not the carer as such. You kind of left to the side, kind of trying to deal with it all. And then within 5 years of Neil having that chemo, and he was having falls, I then sacked myself from the city, as I would say, and decided I could work from home and have quality time with Neil, because I knew that time was limited for us. I didn't want to leave him at home all day watching News 24, you know, or Seinfeld. So I wanted to be there with him, supporting him. And also he'd been having falls. And then a few years later after that, he had a stroke. And it was only a mild stroke, but it really scuppered us. He wasn't, his brain was badly affected from the chemo, radio, from a number of tumours that he'd had. And now he'd had this stroke. So he was brain damaged and he was unable to speak, and he had a feeding tube. And I brought him home. Actually, I brought him home to die at that time, because he was going downhill so rapidly. Others out there who may be listening will understand, you know, when you put a loved one in a hospice, maybe just for you to have a break, or into a hospital, they can start to kind of give up. And that's definitely what Neil was doing. I needed to get him home, whatever would happen. But within a few days, Noel, he actually clearly was better. I mean, he wasn't good, of course, but he couldn't do anything for himself. And he was hoisted out of a hospital bed in our living room here into a wheelchair for a few hours every day. So there was a whole load of things that were going on. For me as a carer, for him full time now, had a baby monitor on at night. He would have choking fits at night. So as many carers know, you don't have good quality sleep. Your world becomes smaller. And of course, with this pandemic, it's smaller still. You know, you feel quite isolated. You feel guilty if you go out. And I think it's even more tough for carers now, because you don't see friends and family as you were. And yeah, you're not taking those regular breaks probably. And I describe, you know, Neil having that brain tumour, although he had the brain tumour, he was the one who was ill. I woke up to brain cancer every day. It may not have been in my head, but I was dealing with it every single day for 13 years in the end. Yeah. And then I ended up falling ill. I ended up falling mentally and physically unwell.
Without doubt. I mean, that's a very familiar story. And it's one of the things I talk to people quite a lot. We can't, if we're around something for a long time, our personalities will adapt to that thing, whether it's a good or a negative thing. It doesn't really matter. We will adapt. Our personalities will adapt. We become that thing. So if we're around somebody's illness, our personality adapts to that illness, unless we're very, very careful. We do very structured, thoughtful things in our lives to counteract that, which is not the common story for carers. The common story for carers is that they dedicate themselves to the care of the other person or the other situation.
You continue giving, and and that's what you do. You become entrained in giving. And then I know of carers and they keep giving. There's one carer that who's a friend, and I chat to her. She's then thinking about everybody else. I keep putting my hand on her arm. Yeah, but what about you? What about you, Jan? How are you feeling? And then it takes seconds, and then she's talking about somebody else who's not well. And I keep trying to bring it back to her, because she's not well in herself. You know, she's in her 60s and she's drained and she's tired. She's been caring for 30 years.
Yeah.
You know? So
I mean, in my field, we talk about a concept called codependency. Which is an unhealthy form of dependency on somebody else or another situation, which is actually destructive to our own personal growth, and also has impacts upon mental health, as you say, but also physical health, and also, people don't really think about this, financial health. That when you go into a caring role, you often give up, as you've described, your ability to earn a living. You become more dependent on state handouts, benefits, all that sort of stuff. So you end up in poverty as well, which is, and poverty itself has its own sort of psychosocial impacts, and this whole set of problems that come with that, as well as the additional cost of caring for somebody. During that time, I'm just, there must have been times that you thought, I've had enough of this. I'm done. I'm finished.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. There was a number of times. I remember going for a carers assessment, actually, and
right. You actually get one. Well done.
yeah, I did. And if anybody out there is listening who hasn't had a carers assessment, do ring your local carers centre, or any of the charities that you're connected to, and ask them for one. Really important. Or your local council. Ask. And see what they can do, even now at this time. So yeah, what I was going to say. So yeah, carers assessment. Now, what I've been doing, I've been bottling up, because what most of us do as carers, we suppress our emotions. We haven't got time to think about us. Our loved one's ill, so we're bottling it up, we're suppressing it. And I wasn't talking to family or friends really about, because Neil had a very, very mild stroke before that one, and I got it into my head, that he was going to die in a few months, and I wasn't ready for that. So I actually suppressed that all those awful feelings, and I felt like I was waking up. Those feelings that when you've been at a funeral, that really bleak, dark, it was horrible, and I was waking up to that every day. I was thinking, God, something's not right. Yeah. But I refuse to do antidepressants. I just don't want to go down that road. I want to do more of a natural route. But then when I'm on the carers assessment, I had as a young Aussie dude, actually, and he said, well, what do you want? I said, what have you possibly got for me that's going to help me care for a terminally ill husband? And he said, well, carers usually know. I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, tell me what's been going on. And it's almost like he just lifted the lid on the pressure cooker, and it all came bubbling over. And through tears and snot bubbles, I basically sobbed, peppered with manic laughter, I have to say, because it was funny, all this happening for an hour in front of this poor chap. But by the end of it, when I came out, I had this little bit of wet tissue as I went into the car park, and I went, oh God, I feel so much better. And I realised, in letting it out, sharing it, letting others know how I really felt, it released a lot. And I went, do you know what? I have so got to make some changes here. And I thought, right, I'm going to get out running more. I'm going to, see my friends more. And I made a concerted effort to make sure I had things in place for me whilst continuing to care for Neil. Yeah.
And how did you find that? I mean, when I'm working with people in this situation at the moment, they can often feel quite guilty about all of that whole process. Was that same for you? Was that a struggle, or did you just go, I'm now a free woman, I'm going to go and do this, this is fantastic? I imagine it wasn't like that. I imagine
if only life was that simple. No. I mean, I've kind of fallen ill. I think it's 13 years for me of caring, so I've fallen ill a number of times. And then I think
do you mind saying what you'd fallen ill with? Because I think it's useful for people in terms of identification to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I fell ill. I've been caring for Neil at home for a few years by then, and he was in the hospital bed. So it was full on 24/7 nursing care. Yeah. And I ended up completely depleted, which I know a lot of carers out there will be feeling at present. Yeah. My immune system was shot. I felt low. And as I continued to do that, I then caught a really nasty chest infection. Right. And I had it for months and months, and no antibiotics were not touching it. And I knew it was because of everything that was going on here, not being kind to myself, not giving myself that love and self-care that I needed. And some friends and family not really realising, some were judging rather than offering support. And because I'm a sensitive soul and an empath, I was taking that to heart, which was draining me and dragging me down. And then, because Neil had been in hospital, he'd picked up MRSA, which of course is the last thing you need. There's different strains of it, by the way. So when he came home, of course, I was touching him and hugging him. I ended up with MRSA infection in both ears, and I was then back and forth from the hospital. And I remember having to get in the shower and cover myself in pink glue and stand there in the cold shivering for 3 minutes. And that, Noel, is when I said, I'm not so sure I'm happy with this caring malarkey. I remember saying that to myself in the shower. But then what happened was, because I was so unwell, I was getting worse. I wasn't getting any better. So I rang the head nurse at our local hospice where Neil went to the day centre, and I said, I don't know what to do. I don't see my friends anymore. I can't get out running, and I've even given up drinking, and that's a tall order because I liked a Prosecco or two. And she said she'd been expecting this call because I've been caring for over 10 years.
Yeah.
So she then had him, got him a place in a nursing home for a couple of weeks. I took myself off on a silent retreat, and yes, I did shut up for 5 days. I didn't really know what I was letting myself in for. It was very powerful.
That would be really hard work. I mean, all joking aside, silent retreats are really, really hard work. When you're faced with that internal dialogue with yourself, that must have been really quite an eye-opener about what the hell was going on inside yourself, because you've had all these years of distractions with somebody else's crises, and then you decide to go on a something. I mean, I'm sort of thinking you're mad, actually.
Oh yeah, don't worry, I'm a proper nutter.
It's the last thing I would do, knowing what I know. There's no way I would go on a silent retreat.
Oh, now, Noel, now I'm telling you, yes, then we need to experience all these kind of things.
Okay.
And I'm going to be really honest with you. When I went down to Gaia House in Devon, actually. Yeah. It's cheap, actually. But, a couple of hot stone massages weren't going to sort me out. I needed something a lot stronger. And I knew that. I'd been unwell mentally and physically for quite some time.
Yeah.
So with that, your body purges when you are on these silent retreats. It can be very uncomfortable. It can be painful physically. This is going to sound maybe a little bit what people don't really.
No, you're just horrifying me. It's okay, don't worry. I'm a wimp about any of these things. I know what a silent retreat does to people. I know exactly what goes on.
Yeah. So what happens is this is the thing, when you have a thought, say you've got and I know there'll be carers or any of us out there, if you've got negative thoughts on a loop,
yeah,
thinking that certain negative thoughts that come up, it might be about somebody causing you grief, something that's coming up, a loved one might be really poorly, and this worry and angst. It's not just hot air. It's more than that. It's energy, and it gets stored into the body. I know that sounds a little bit freaky, but it stores itself in various places in the body, certain organs, depending on what it is. And when I was on the silent retreat, I was getting pains in my body.
Yes.
And I was releasing energy. I only had, and that happened within 24 hours of silence. We were meditating as well, cups of herbal tea, of course. And then by the end, within 24 hours of the pain that I was experiencing, it was gone, and I felt completely better. And I am going to say this, I'm going to share this. When we all sat in a big circle, about 40 of us, when on the last morning before we left, it's 5 days, and there was a lovely late Asian girl, and she was probably about mid-30s, and she said for 15 years she'd had pain in her shoulder and in her arm. She tried to do all sorts of things to fix it. Nothing had fixed it, and today it was gone for the first time in 15 years. Like something had released from her just through doing half an hour meditations and silence. It's very powerful, actually.
Yeah, I mean, meditation and silent retreats, I might joke with you, I wouldn't go on one myself because I know what I'm like as a person. And I am a wimp, so that's the truth. But
it's hardcore.
I'm aware of the sort of power of these things, and I think it's really important to talk about them, because I think one of the things that carers need to do is break out of the box that they place themselves in some ways. I don't want to say you're victimizing yourself, but being a carer trains you into sort of away from a genuine, authentic connection with your own needs. And that's dreadful. That's the most dreadful thing any human being is going to do to themselves, is to disconnect from their own needs. And anything that you can do that to reconnect with an authentic sense of your own needs and go and get them is absolutely crucial. I'm going to think about, let's talk about kids and being carers, because I think sometimes I think adults as carers can often be really, really harsh on themselves, and other adults who look at carers can be harsh on those carers.
Yes.
And be very, very judgmental. You touched upon that. But I want to make this point about how unhelpful that is, either the carer themselves or the observer. We think about children as carers and what happens to them and the sort of things that happen to them, because exactly the same things happen to adults as carers, without a doubt. So we have also a set of syndromes now around children as carers, and it involves understanding that they have personality damage. They have damage around the ability to regulate in relationship with other people. They have identity problems. They have low self-esteem. They have less ability to regulate emotional responses, and so are impulsive and self-harming. They can be angry, antisocial, lots of illnesses. Is any of this familiar? Is this sounding familiar?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same across the board, really, because you're kind of robbed of your identity at times. It kind of all blurs. What your wants and needs are out of the window. And I described it like this: you don't put yourself last on the list. You're not even on the list. That's how I saw it. Actually, in taking yourself out of the situation to have a break, whether you're a child, whatever it is, being young carers, being supported by charities, they offer all sorts of things and activities for them. Not just that, but getting into the outside space helps you deal with the inside space. And that's what I found in, say, for example, the silent retreat. There's a few things that I went, okay, I've got to make some big changes here. I make things different. I can't keep going the way I am. You say the victim mentality, you can kind of do that, this kind of woe is me. That doesn't help.
No, I didn't mean it that way. I genuinely, I sort of victim blaming is the better term. I definitely wouldn't. I don't want to be seen to be victim blaming at all. I mean, I think the sort of carer syndrome is real. That's why we have carers assessments. That's why there's legislation saying that people who are carers should have their needs assessed and met. And we also have to recognise that we use carers in lieu of paying for social workers, nurses, etc., etc. And so actually carers are a very significant part of the whole health and social care landscape in the UK.
Massively. In fact, there's now because of the pandemic, it's something must be over 11 million carers in the UK, and they save the government something like 132 billion pounds a year, the same cost of a second NHS. But the carers allowance is meagre, and if you're the one left doing the care, then if you step up to the mark. Others, and when I say others, I will mean social services in essence, and another family may leave you to it, and you get on with it.
Social services will leave you to it. I guarantee they will. I was a social services manager for 15 years. Seriously, I absolutely know this from the inside. That if anybody steps forward and volunteers to do any work, it's like, great, thanks very much, bye, see you later. Later alligator, and then that's the way it goes. And it's not to say that people shouldn't step forward, but I think that my sort of argument would be, and see how it feels to you, is that that if one is in a caring role and may want to do that, that's okay, but be very thoughtful about what you do and what you don't do, and what sort of boundaries that you put in place, so that you don't become the person who's nailed to the cross.
No, and it becomes exactly that, actually. It is about creating a balance in your life, knowing where to push back, knowing where to say no. You can't do everything. And it is also about carving out time for yourself. And you need it, because the bottom line is, if you don't, because at the moment, up to about 70% of carers fall mentally or physically unwell. That needs to change. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm chatting to you. That's why, I've written my book, because this information is, and it does work. And I've got some great stories of just asking carers to do something just slightly differently, and in just tweak.
We're gonna come to the solution. I mean, definitely.
Great.
The way that you do the solution, I really want to get onto that. But my thinking here, and let's see, tell me if you agree with this or not. But my thinking here is that if we can spin your story out a bit more, that potentially what happens in sort of hearing these stories is that somebody who's listening, who's in it, can go, oh, that's me. Oh, maybe I'm not doing the right thing. Maybe I do need to think about this. So, and that's why, if you don't mind, like to do a bit more of your story, because so you go on this retreat and you begin to understand that, okay, there's something going on, but I guess that's not the end of the story in terms of your journey about understanding that I have needs, they're legitimate, and I need to go and shout and get them met. Do you mind telling us a bit more about that? Sort of, because again, I imagine that you had all sorts of contradictory thoughts and feelings about it. You know, you have this revelation, I'm on this
Yeah,
thing,
yeah, it did.
and then you have to come back to the situation and deal with it, right?
Yes, and it's kind of what I found was, like I say, you know, when you have a break, when you get away from the situation, you can start to think, you get clarity. That's what you get. You can start to think straight and go, right, what's been happening? And that's what I was doing. I was doing things like journaling, which was really great. Jotting down my inner thoughts, because your thoughts go round and round and round in your head. It doesn't do you any good. If you actually, sometimes if you just write it out onto a page, kind of getting those thoughts out onto paper, it actually is therapeutic. It does a lot more than just jotting down some notes. So I was doing that sort of thing. And while I was on there, I realized there were certain friends and family who'd been judging me. And I think back to, if you saw me on Facebook at that time, I'm not doom and gloom. I'm like, so I always put on a brave face. But maybe that was the problem. So if you saw me on Facebook, it would be if I had a drink in my hand and smiling with friends if I was out. So I think people were judging, and that's why I call it fake book. But as I said to one of my friends, Cookie, I said, if I took a snapshot of me at 4 p.m. every day, it would be a completely different story. It would be changing Neil's nappy.
Yeah.
It would be crying. It would be waiting for hours at the blinking pharmacist down the road, sorting out paid carers. The list was endless. But people don't know what they're judging. And that's the trouble. And that was a big thing. And whilst I was on the silent retreat, I thought of these people who didn't have the empathy and the compassion. And I thought to myself, you know what? If they come to our front door again, great. If they never come to the front door again, great. I emotionally let them go. Yeah. It's a very difficult one. And if any carers are listening or anybody's listening, think, oh, but I didn't want to fall out with, say, certain family or whoever it was, because then and I know of carers who've kind of dropped a bomb and said, I am done with you. I cannot, and I know why, and I don't blame them personally. Yeah. But it's a difficult one, because you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, to be honest with you. But I emotionally let them go. So whatever they did, I mean, there was still a few things that came up that caused me a bit of grief, but I almost laughed at it and went, there it is again. Remember that? It was almost like safeguarding yourself against, because we're an eclectic bunch, all of us, especially within families. Some of us have got love and compassion and some less so. And I've got a great analogy. So as I'd come back from this silent retreat, a good friend of mine, Joe, came over and we stood in the kitchen. Neil was in the hospital bed in the living room. And I'd said about a particular family member and a particular friend who caused me a lot of grief at that time. And Joe said, oh, my ex-mother-in-law said, people are like taps or drains. Taps are loving and giving, and some people are just draining. Yeah. And honestly, no, within a split second, it was like a penny dropped.
Yeah.
I had been expecting, I thought everybody was like me.
No, they're not.
They're not. And I thought they were. And within that split second, I realized that these two people were huge drains. And so with that, Joe went home, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I did. I had my little eureka moment, and I thought about the friend. I never saw her again. I chose to call it a day there, because I couldn't fall ill again, because Neil will end up dying in a nursing home, and I didn't want that to be the end of our story. Yeah. I wanted him here with me. And with family, like I say, I didn't really want to fall out. So I kept my distance, arm's length. Still diplomatic, still fine, but just keeping my distance. And this is what I did, and any carers could try this. I got a sheet of paper, drew a line down the middle, taps, drains, and I thought of all friends and family. Right. It took about, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, however long it took. And I started to, and I gave it a second thought for each one.
Yeah, absolutely, that's right.
And within a split, within those 10 minutes, I went, oh my God, Sarah, the list of taps was extensive. But there was this small group of people, and some of them surprised me, who appeared in drains. And with that, I said, Sarah, surround yourself with the taps.
Yeah,
forget about the drains, and with the people who were draining, it was just being aware of that and keeping my distance. Drains aren't, well, it can be vindictive or malicious, but usually they're not. Usually draining people, they've got stuff going on for them personally anyway. for a whole variety of reasons, that they cannot see past their nose to see what you're going through.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there's a difference between people who are drained because of their own stuff and people who are actively dangerous. And being able to understand who's actively dangerous is another skill that's really useful. Sort of put very, very clear boundaries in. I mean, that sounds like it was amazing, and also that the fact that you did it intuitively as well is I think a really good idea. To reaffirm that intuitively I do know what I'm doing, and I'm going to trust myself, going to trust my gut. I'm not going to spend lots of time trying to figure out things, and just trust that and make decisions. It's interesting that you sort of decided to sort of remain in relationship to people. It's an interesting choice. Other people may not make that decision, and that's okay as well, to cut.
No, absolutely. It's your life. I will say this to anybody out of your life. You live it as you see fit. I think too many of us are living other people's lives, what they want us to do. I was a huge people pleaser, and at times I catch myself still doing it now, practically a walking doormat at times. I have family come over and I'd sleep on the floor whilst they slept in my bed. I'm an idiot. And, I look back at that now. I won't do that again. I was a carer, and
were you the angry doormat as well? They got really pissed off that people walked all over you and wiped their feet on you, but you were lying down in front of the door.
If you treat yourself like a walking doormat, others will wipe their feet on you.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Yeah, it is. It is about, having love and respect for yourself. And if you notice somebody taking advantage of your good nature, which they will do if you're loving and giving, feel it, notice it. And if you do notice it and you feel it in your heart, like, I don't feel, then there's a reason. Notice, recognize that.
So what I'm hearing you say is that during the time that you were an active carer, you're beginning this journey of your own rehabilitation, as it were.
Yeah. Yes.
And sort of getting yourself back in touch with yourself, your needs, your wishes, your wants, thinking about what you need in terms of support. And you're on this journey. Wouldn't be straightforward. It never is straightforward. Life isn't. And then you're going through this process while you're still caring. And how was that? How did it feel in terms of your caring role? And what do you think it did around your caring role?
Actually, it gave me more energy.
Right.
It made me a stronger carer in actually filling myself up and doing things for me. And if others were judging, I would, it's like, well, what are you judging? I'm not interested in that. I have to live my life as I see fit.
It's interesting. I've just had a real sense of anger. It really annoys me when people think they have the right to judge in this way. And I had this real sense of, just piss off, will ya? My stuff. There you go. But I'm sort of empathizing, I guess, with the story. And I can't say enough to people, if you're listening, that find a way of managing away from the people that are going to judge you. It's the last thing you need, because what will happen psychologically to yourself is that you're judging yourself anyway as never good enough, and we're all doing that.
We are horribly critical, horrible to myself. I tell you what.
If we allow an externalization of that in the form of another person, it will reconfirm that stuff, and it will cause a lot of damage to ourselves. So the last thing in the world you want is anybody who's in there with a negative vibe around what you're doing. Sort of do it in the way that you're doing it, Sarah, which was, just emotionally detaching. That's very successful tool. Or if you have to emotionally shoot them dead and get them out of your life, do that as well.
Yes,
but whatever you do, get rid of them.
I agree, absolutely, and I think it's for any of us, actually. You know who your tribe is. Your vibe is this is a kind of a state.
Really is important. It really is important. But you're going through this, and you notice, contrary to your sort of guilty thoughts about, I've got to be self-sacrificing, you notice actually that for want of a better word, your performance as a carer improves because you're investing in yourself.
Yes.
Shock?
Yes. And taking time to enjoy myself guilt-free, that was the thing. So, when I came home, it took me a while to recover. I'd not physically, I'd been unwell for quite some time. So that chest infection and how I was feeling, it was still there for a while, but finally managed to shrug it. And I was safeguarding. I was pushing back, knowing where to say no. If I was away for for a week if Neil was able to go into a nursing home into the hospice for a week. I actually asked family to ring him daily to see how he was, because he'd been a bit angry on the phone with me at one time, because he's so vulnerable. You know, he didn't want to be in the hospice. Who does? I don't blame him. But I needed time out, and to keep ringing him and thinking about him wasn't a holiday. And I do remember.
Let's go back, because I want to go through that story again, because this is really, really important. And this should not be. So the person you're caring for gets angry with you when you start to care for yourself.
Yes, but
How did you manage that? How did you manage that? Because that's like, because again, it's one of those things. I think one of the things is that people just, I guess, decent human beings who don't have too many internal problems would be surprised that somebody else would judge a carer. And they're sort of listening to this conversation and go, oh God, why would you do that? But it happens. So you have to be realistic. You can't be naive as a codependent, as a carer. You can't afford to be naive about this stuff, folks. That there are haters in the world. You've got to identify them, and you've got to cut them out of the herd. It's that simple. Otherwise, you're going to go under.
No, very, very well said.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And then when the person that you're caring for is gonna have a difficult reaction, that's gonna twist the knife a little bit.
Oh, it twisted it, yeah.
I'm sure it did. I could just imagine. So tell us about that. Go on, share some of that with us.
So Neil,
really
you know what? He was very good, because I think of one particular lady I did an interview with her, and it was called "Caring for an Angry Man." I mean, you have mentioned that, giving your love and your time, just keep getting slapped, you know, mentally in the face every time, you know, hitting, you know, stepping on a rake and getting smacked in the face. It's like, God, you know, can't win here. But yeah, Neil, I'd gone off to the Alps actually skiing. A friend, very lucky, for a week. I mean,
it's lucky. It's normal. People do that. It's fine. I'm not having me.
Yeah, exactly. So
a great time in the Alps. Well done.
So I was out there and blue skies. Neil was he was in hospital at the time actually, and I that's when he'd had the stroke, and it was just having that week's break, because I was in there every day for 2 months. And I rang him just to see how he was, and he shouted down the phone, "Get back here now!" And I was so shocked, because that's not like Neil. Neil had a heart of gold. He was really, really lovely. But so that shocked me even more. And I said, "Can't, Neil, I'm in the Alps." And he hung up. I had tears, because I was so shocked. And like, how can I go and enjoy myself now, skiing down the mountaintops, you know, when I've got angry husband at home, or rather at hospital? So I rang family and I said, "Can you ring him every day and check him, make sure he's okay?" And I didn't ring again. And I kind of jokingly, I kind of bought this huge Toblerone for him, as you do from duty free. And I kind of said, you know, if he's not careful, I'm going to beat him with this Toblerone if he starts to cause me any grief when I get back. But he was absolutely fine. Just relieved that I'd come back. Of course, he was in a vulnerable place, and also, if you're their primary carer and you're giving your love, you know, who else can they take it out on but you? And that's what Neil, you couldn't take it out on anybody else, you know. And I will say, just one other time that it was very rare of Neil to do this, so I'm very lucky and fortunate. But I was feeding him a bit of chocolate mousse in his hospital bed, and this is 2 years before he actually finally went. And he couldn't speak. Once in a blue moon, he'd blurt out a couple of words, and that would be it. And he said, "I hate you." After all the years of giving my health, giving up my career, all the things that I'd done, and I stopped feeding him, and I said, "Have you got any idea what I've done for you, Neil?" And his eyes went really wide. And did Neil hate me? No, I don't think he hated me. I was feeding him chocolate mousse. But he was trying to blurt out, you know, his frustration, his anger, hatred of the situation, you know, who's a burden on me. He could see that, you know, sometimes I cried on his shoulder, which is a terrible thing. And so I continued to feed him. And when I went upstairs to bed, I had a few tears actually. And I thought, you know what? Neil doesn't love himself. He's in a very dark place. The only place for him to release from there is death, which is grim, is horrendous.
But that's the stuff that isn't talked about in the caring relationship, is quality of life for the person being cared for, and their wish and attempts to offload these really dark experiences that they're having inside themselves onto the carer, and how the carer isn't equipped for that. So the suicidality, the wish to die, the actual physical request, like, will you kill me?
Actually, Neil did say those two words. I'm trying to think how much long later. It wasn't during that time, whether it was a year or two later, but he said commit suicide to me.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't know what to say. Now, if I had my time again, I think I did speak to him about it, but I found it as a very surreal moment. And the only way that Neil could communicate was to put his right thumb up like that. Yeah. And I know if I'd said dignitas, he would have done that.
Yeah.
And then I'd have gone, now what do I do? And yeah, exactly. I wasn't going to take him to dignitas.
Yeah. But it's a big thing, and also the medical system, when it comes to it, will ask you, do we resuscitate? Do we keep the machines going? Do we turn them off? And somehow you're supposed to make that decision, which is grossly unfair.
Well, he had to do not resuscitate, so he had a do not resuscitate form. Yeah. He talked about it years before when he was first diagnosed. You know, I think for most don't work. 3 out of 4 don't work anyway. Resuscitations apparently, yeah. But you know, but I certainly did. You know, if Neil didn't have that do not resuscitate form, they'd have started to try and mess about with him if he was out of it. And I'm like, no, don't do that. That would just. Yeah. You know, you just make things even worse. That's if you brought him back. So yeah, you can get a do not resuscitate form, which is, and it's another thing, another form that during that time was power of attorney, which was
and lasting power of attorney as well, so you get the social care side of things.
Well, financially, it would have scuppered us here because I needed to make sure that I got care coming in, bills being paid. Some of them were in our names jointly, some weren't. It just meant that I could get on with, and I know with others who haven't got power of attorney for whoever they're caring for, it's caused a lot of stress and hassle on top of everything else you're dealing with. So it definitely worked.
Absolutely. There's a lot of practical things. And we're sort of segueing into that part of the conversation. We're getting there, but I did want to, I'm a psychotherapist, so I sort of do this anyway, but I wanted to sort of go into some of the reality of your experience a bit more, so that people who are listening and maybe watching at another time can sort of get some identification, particularly people who are in it, hearing the story and hearing the actual day-to-day stuff, and you know, how unfair it is. And it's just not fair being a carer. There's nothing fair about it. And the reality is, nobody's going to step in and rescue you from this really shitty situation. You're going to have to find the strength and courage to get in touch with yourself and then build your sense of self again and your needs, and learn all these communication skills, and ignore the negative voices that tell you you're somehow bad because actually you just want to have a life. Just in terms of the relationship with Neil, and I wonder how it went in terms of, as you do sort of, I mean, there wasn't that much of a relationship with him because of the level of disability that he had. But as you do begin to develop your own sense of personhood again.
Yes.
Generally, that improves the relationship with the person being cared for.
Absolutely, it did.
I did, right, okay, good.
So I described it almost at that time as holding on to emotionally and physically very tightly. Yeah. But as he was waning and he was deteriorating, I was sinking with him. That's how I would describe it. And I realised I had to actually loosen. That's one of the reasons actually I went on the silent retreat. It was loosen my grip on Neil. Yeah. You know, we were on this journey together, but one of us is going to pass before the other. You know, we're all going to pass at different times. And your number one person in your life for all of us is yourself.
Yeah.
Because you are the center, stage in the movie of your life. Yeah. So you've got to make sure you're all right, because if you're not all right, how can you be there for anybody else? So I was I was taking better care of myself then.
It's also a fact of any relationship between adults is that if you're not individuated in relationship and relating to each other as different people and making conscious choices to be involved with each other, your relationship is going to end up in a car crash. That's just a fact. That for any relationship to be healthy, there needs to be two people who are whole human beings as much as they can be, and then living their lives as whole human beings who are making voluntary decisions to share aspects of their functioning with another person. That's what a relationship is.
Absolutely, it is.
And if it's based upon sort of guilt, disorder, darkness, obligation, all of that sort of stuff, it's on a hiding to nothing. So I guess my intuition was right, and my experience is when I talk to people that as you get back into having a healthy relationship to yourself, your capacity to have a healthy relationship to the person who has a disability or the needs to be cared for improves as well.
Yes, between you anyway, but because I was better, I was feeling better, I had more energy, I was in a better state of mind, and in doing that and taking time for myself and carving out guilt-free, I made decisions from a better state of mind. So I was making better decisions, actually, in filling myself up. I had more to give Neil. I knew where to push back. It was actually being more authentic, not just with those around me, but with myself. And recognizing and just saying no sometimes. I'm afraid I can't do that. Just being really honest, being authentic, dropping the mask, not keep putting on that brave face, which too many of us do. If you want everybody to like you, well, you can't get everybody to like you all of the time. You might as well like yourself.
I think that's probably the most important person you need to like is yourself. And now we I guess the inevitable is on the cards. Neil is going to die. This. He does die,
Yes.
and that's got to have been horrific. But also at the same time, I remember when my mum died from cancer. It was horrible, of course, but it was also a bloody relief, I have to say, because it's been going on forever.
How long was she ill with cancer? No?
She was ill for quite a while, and I was quite young. And but I suppose my experience was at the time was that I suppressed some of those feelings of relief, thinking somehow that was wrong, that you're not supposed to feel relieved that somebody's died. But actually, her quality of life was so poor that the poor woman. I'm glad it was over for her. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't going anywhere. But what was it? What was it like for you? I mean,
it was fine. So, on the 6th of September 2015, so it's just been 5 years now, Neil had another stroke. I'd actually wheeled him down in his wheelchair to Twickenham Stadium, we're just a mile away from that. So his last day was watching England beat Ireland just before the World Cup. So
can't ask for more than that. Except I'm Irish, so I'm slightly resentful that that's what happened. But there you go. More than that.
So we were friends and family. My mum and dad were with us as well. And the last thing he tasted was Bollinger. So there we go. That's that's not, if it's going to be your last day, that's not bad. And it's kind of weird how it all happened. As soon as got Neil home, hoisted him into the hospital bed, and he had a stroke. Had a huge bleed. I didn't realise that's what it was. Got him to hospital. I just didn't recognise that's what was happening. It's kind of weird how it all happened. Got him to hospital, I don't know, at midnight. And my mum, Mum said, I'll come with you. I said, oh, don't worry, they'll just patch him up, because I always said he's not staying here because he'd been hurt very badly by hospital in the past. And I just say, patch him up, send him home. He's not staying here. I need him in my care. And then, of course, they scanned his brain. They said, actually, because Neil had been at the hospital so often at that time, he was so very ill, in palliative care. They said, I'm sorry to inform you, he's had a huge bleed. He's dying. And I actually said, what now? Because the amount of times I blubbed, thinking, this is it. No, this is it. And it had been happening so many times. I was really shocked that it was like now it's happening now. And I said, well, how long? He said, well, it could be 2 days. Oh my God, because I thought, well, I can't leave his bedside now, you know.
Yeah.
But Neil actually passed in about an hour and a half later.
Right.
And I had my hand on, and that you could see on the monitor, the figures were dropping, so things were changing. And Neil kind of looked asleep, but I think he was in transition, but he was kind of looked out of it. And I had one hand on his heart, the other on his head, and I was just kind of there with him and with my mum. And as he passed, I actually said thank you, because I didn't want him suffering anymore, and I didn't want to suffer with him. It'd been too much for too long. And it's all about, Noel, it's about quality of life for all of us. For all of us, it really is.
Yeah.
And it was a relief. So, I sat down. I felt like I could sit down for a week.
Did you? Right. Okay. But I also imagine that there was something weird as well, because this had been your whole life, albeit that you had been reclaiming aspects of your life that weren't the caring role, but it was still a huge part of your life in terms of purpose and meaning. Yeah. This is what I am. I'm a carer. I'm other things now as well.
Yeah, you know, that's your identity, and I would say that is wrong. I would say to anybody out there, I'm a carer. I used to say to people, I'm just a carer. Might as well just say I'm a walking dog. I'm a dog's body. No, you're not. Yeah. You know, you are so much more. You are in a caring role, but you are so many other things. You know that. You just happen to be caring for somebody. Yeah. Recognize that you're not just a carer. Caring is an amazing thing anyway, because not everybody can do it. You know that. Many walk, and I've spoken to those who have. But yeah, caring, but not the carer is the phrase I would use.
Yeah, absolutely. And naturally, you go through a grieving process, and often, it's not always, but often it's more complex in these types of situations because of the baggage and, for want of a better word, the damage that's occurred that we need to process and come to terms with, and maybe we have some complex feelings about the person we were in that caring role too, possibly, are difficult to process and let go of. We don't need to go into that, but
No, I was not too bad actually. I gave thanks. I know that there's more to life than meets the eye anyway. You know, I don't like to use the word death and dying. It's actually passing over from the things that I've learned through meditation and stuff. So I know, I'm not religious, but I know that there's a whole lot more besides. And I will share this. I read Anita Moorjani's book, Moorjani, Anita Moorjani. She had a huge near-death experience, NDE, and I just needed. When I read her book at the time, and I met her when she came. She gave a great talk at Alternatives in Piccadilly in London, and how she'd been a people pleaser and a walking doormat for most of her life, and she ran away from an arranged marriage. Anyway, because of the stress and worry and trying to be all things to everybody, she ended up with 4 years of cancer, and then in hospital in a coma, and had a huge near-death experience. She was outside her body. She could see everything that was going on simultaneously. Absolutely amazing. It's all documented. And then they said, it's not your time. Her father had passed, was there. And he said, come, you need to go back. And she said, well, I'm not living like that, how she'd been living. And so she agreed to come back, and she came back into her body, and she was pretty much, she'd had tumours of kind of the size of lemons in her torso. She had open skin lesions. That was it. She was emaciated from cancer. But within 3 weeks, I think it was pretty much gone. It was like a miraculous, and they just couldn't find the cancer in her body. And now she talked around the world. And so her book, Dying to Me, was profound. And I read, so when in the last summer of Neil's life, so he was grim and he wasn't so good. I read him that chapter. I wedged myself in sideways into his hospital bed with him with the cot sides up. I said, I want to read this to you of what happened, because I knew that Neil was not religious. He was atheist. And he thought, well, when you die, that's it. That's a really grim outlook, of course. And from where he was. And I read how she felt all this unconditional love. She felt, all these beautiful things. And of course, then she healed. And I said, Neil, so, you shouldn't be afraid to die. We're all going to go, but, it's only your body that perishes. You move on. I said, did you enjoy that? And his thumb went up that quickly, and he was gone within that week. And it gave him permission to go.
Right.
And I thought, if there's anybody out there who's struggling with that side of things, maybe take a look at that. There's a lot of YouTube clips for Anita as well. I think she's great. She lives a very different life now. So it's like, pushing back, living her life fearlessly. That's what she was told. Right. Live your life fearlessly, how you see fit, not what others are dictating to you.
Let me tell you a story now, if that's okay. I'm going to tell you a myth, a story, because I think it moves us into the next section of your actual journey. So it's about the choosing of a new shaman in the village. And so the old shaman knows that they're going to die. And part of their job is to choose the person who's going to take on the mantle of the shaman being a particular type of healing and a belief in a particular type of healing. So the shaman calls all the village together, are all a bit nervous. It's like, I don't know, I'm not sure I want to be the shaman, and we know this is what he's going to do, and wanders through the village, and then eventually stops and touches an adolescent child. And at that point, all the good spirits that provide healing and nurture and growth in life come and pick up the adolescents and fly them away to the underworld. And the underworld is where all the bad spirits are. And in this sort of shamanic belief system, the bad spirits are responsible for illnesses. And then the soon-to-be new shaman is there, and their clothes fall off, they're naked, they're available. And some of the bad spirits that cause some of the illnesses come and they rend the flesh from the bone, from the body, and the sort of adolescent is aware, conscious, experiencing this all the way through, and then they finish rending the flesh and they leave it in a pile. The skeleton is still there while the adolescent is alive, experiencing, and those that set of evil spirits go, and then a new set of evil spirits come, again responsible for certain types of illnesses, and then they begin to break all the bones of the adolescent, and then each bone is broken and then left in a pile. So you have a pile of flesh that has been rendered and a pile of bones that have been broken, and during all of this, the adolescent is aware, conscious, experiencing, feeling. And those bad spirits, evil spirits, leave. And then the good spirits that brought the adolescent to the underworld come back, and they refuse the bones and rebuild the skeletal structure. And then they take the rended flesh and they reclothe the body in the flesh, and they take the now shaman from the underworld and fly the shaman back to the village, and this is how the new shaman is chosen, and this is how the new shaman is formed. And the interesting thing about that shaman is that they can only heal in somebody else those illnesses that are caused by one of the evil spirits that visited them while they were in the underworld. If they meet somebody with an illness that isn't caused by that evil spirit, they will say, well, you need to go to the next village because I think that shaman was visited by that evil spirit in the underworld. I can't help you. And the reason I'm talking about this is because this notion, I mean, it's part of a whole series of stories and myths around what we call the wounded healer. The transformative power of negative experiences in life, traumatic experiences in life, and how it changes us, and how it can change us in a way that is a part of our growth and development.
Absolutely, it does.
And yeah, you're recognizing the story, aren't you? Because that happens to you somehow, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. When you're going through trauma, through dreadful situations where it breaks you mentally and physically, emotionally, which it most definitely did me. You kind of go. For me, I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? What's going on there? What do I need to do differently? And it does make, I certainly look at life a whole lot deeper. What what do I need to do now to live my best life, actually? And I've kind of been pursuing on that through meditation and learning all sorts of things along the way. I find life fascinating on that.
And more, as well as your own personal journey, because I think that once we get authentic in our experience, so it's sort of what we do for our own personal journey then becomes an expression
Yes.
of our life. And in the old Buddhist term, it's karma and dharma. So you find your meaning and purpose, which is your dharma, and then your karma, i.e. your life, just naturally falls into place. And so you find some meaning and purpose within all of this, clearly. And how is that being expressed? Because you then turn these experiences into something very real and helpful for other people. So do you mind telling us about some of that? The sort of things that you're doing, and
things to share actually for anybody out there in a caring role. In the last year of Neil's life, as I'd regained my health and strength, and I was enjoying life again, even whilst caring for a terminally ill husband. And I was a trustee for a charity at the time. God, and then I ran a marathon as well. I really did make a rod for my own back. I think back it's like, maybe just sit down, Sarah, and just have a chocolate biscuit. Anyway, I don't know what was wrong with me.
Classic sort of response of somebody who's been in a caring role. Okay, now I'll go and climb Everest because it wasn't enough for 15 years, was it? I'll climb up Everest and then I'll bungee jump off the top and... you know, at the same time, I'll clean all the oxygen bottles away from it as well, because
absolutely. If I can make it any tougher, bring it on. So I realized that I'd learned so many things, and also, anybody in a caring role learns the hard way, usually on your own. There's no kind of silver platter with, here you go, here's all the things you need, or any of that sort of things. You learn.
Horror. No, there isn't.
you get slapped in the face with one thing. As soon as you sort of go, okay, I've dealt with that now, and then bang, you get slapped in the face with something else. Oh, okay, now I've got that to deal with. Okay, that person, this doctor, this whatever it happens to be, or what's going on for yourself personally. So I realized that's when I started to write my book. Who Cares? How to Care for Yourself whilst caring for a loved one. I'll just quickly show a quick cover of it, because there's a few books called Who Cares online, actually, on Amazon. And
we got a picture of that we can sort of make sure goes out. Absolutely.
I'm
asking the team, we'll make sure it goes out.
Thank you. So that's when I started to write it. And what I did was I wrote down all the issues that I had to deal with over those 13 years, and also issues that other carers had dealt with. Because it had been 13 years for me and it had been so hardcore with caring, I think I've been through pretty much most of them. I know financially that some carers end up losing their house, things like that. So luckily I didn't go through that horrendousness, but pretty much everything else, I got the stamp of, it hit me at some point. So I started to write that all out. It's taken a while, actually. So it's taken 6 years for the book was published in June for Carers Week, which is fantastic with Hammersmith Books. So they've got a whole load of books on caring on their website. So I knew that they'd be intrigued. So that was great. So putting out there, I'm also involved with charities. So I'm still involved with INS, Neuro Charity based in Twickenham, Integrated Neurological Services, because they'd been supporting myself and Neil, giving Neil one-to-one physiotherapy, which was amazing. They are a truly unique charity. So I was a trustee on their board and for a number of years, and still do their mind, body, spirit group as well. I take that every fortnight. So people with neuro conditions or carers, we talk about the holistic side of, empowering and looking after yourself. And also then I created from the book Carers Masterclass, and I did just print it out actually, so I'm just going to show you a quick, so just over, there we go. I recognise that we're five.
I didn't see that, put it back up.
Oh, okay, so it's 5 key areas in caring.
Get it closer so I can see it. That's it. So I can see Cloud 9, clarity, control, connect, and core. So talk me through that. Talk me through those terms. Great.
So shall I put it down? Okay, so with clarity, it really was about becoming conscious. Like I say, when you're having that break, you're keeping yourself, you get yourself out of this. It's about gaining clarity. I ask carers to check, to really check in on themselves. How are you feeling mentally, emotionally, and physically, because the thoughts and feelings impact the body, and usually we're suppressing our emotions. So it's ways to gain clarity. It's actually in training them, because their neural pathways are going out towards somebody else. It's about bringing that and changing that. You know, it can be very difficult for somebody who's caring, who's been doing it for years, but actually training you to actually think about yourself, what your wants and needs. Don't feel guilty about that. You need, you know, you're caring for two.
Well, feel guilty, but do it. I don't give a shit what you feel like. Just do it.
Get on with it and do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So ways to do that is in clarity. And then control, it's about taking back control for the next week on that. So ways to make your life easier, actually. So what can you control? What can't you control? Obviously, for all of us looking at the pandemic, there's little you can do on some things. Some things you can control and some things less so. So there's different ways on looking after, making life easier, structuring it, putting things in place. And then we go on to connect. This is a big one for carers, especially with everything that's happening. And it's about your support network. Your ultimate support network. And of course, I talked about taps and drains, of course, that's in that section, but there's a whole lot more. I use a bit of psychology. I use things like the drama triangle, which you probably know about that, don't you know?
Yeah, I mean, I live in it.
I love it. As soon as I heard that, I went, oh, that's going.
That's what I wake up to every morning, and that's just inside my own head. Nobody else can help me. I've got all those
I love the drama triangle. When I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. And there's the shadow self, that side of things. I love all that. So I share
tell us about the drama triangle. Persecutor, rescuer.
Yes, persecutor. So within a conflict, you'll have persecutor, somebody, you know, being the blamer. Then you'll have rescuer, which is what majority of us carers are, you know, oh, let me rescue, you know, what can I do to help? And then you have victim at the bottom, you know, oh, you know, woe is me, what, you know, this always happens, what, you know, they're victimizing me, you know, that kind of thing. So it's what you can do.
The thing about drama triangle, what I teach people about, so I don't know if you do, is that once you're in it, you're just going to keep going round in it. The only thing you can do is avoid it. So get out of it. So recognize it, don't go into it. And people swap those roles and they become various things and all that sort of stuff. So
it's almost like codependency again. One will be one, and then, you know, you'll play off each, and you'll just play those dramas out over and over. If you just step away from it and go, well, I'm not going to get involved with that now.
Exactly.
I'm going to do something slightly different. Or I'm not going to be rescuer this time. I'm sure you can sort it out. You know, I didn't mean anything by that, or whatever it is. They'll go, oh. And then, you know, things will shift. You know, sometimes just doing something very subtle, it can create shifts of energy, and things, you know, and things can become a lot more positive. So
we're always, I suppose, you know, one of the things that I'm always working with people is, what's the small thing they can do that can have a big impact, rather than what's the big thing you can do to try and control everything, because you can't control everything. So it's really, you know, there's always a small thing you do. And I think the drama triangle is a beautiful example of it. That the small thing that you do with the drama triangle is don't step into it. That's it.
Yes.
And if you don't step into the drama triangle, it just die and disappear, and life improves massively. And all you have to do is nothing, literally nothing. Don't do anything. Don't go in.
Don't get involved. As Neil used to come out with a great phrase, just don't get involved.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinarily powerful, these things. So what else is on
okay. So then core, so I talk about core, CORE, your health and well-being. So it's ways to improving your health, talk about meditation, things like that, nutrition, all sorts of things to improve, you know, improve your well-being, your body, you know, which, you know, everything's interconnected with your mind and how you're feeling, you know. And then finally it's cloud nine, you know, being on cloud nine, very difficult for anybody in a caring role, but essentially about enjoying your life, you know, focusing on the good stuff.
Absolutely.
You know, we can be in survival mode as carers all the time. That it doesn't make for an enjoyable life. In fact, you're just going to end up being drained and depleted. It is about focusing on the good stuff, you know.
Without doubt. And I say this to people all the time, like, we can give them treatment for depression, but if the rest of your life is rubbish anyway, you know, maybe you're depressed for a real reason, you know, sort of whatever, you know, it's that meaning and purpose and engagement, fun, enjoyment, things that you really want to do. So, like, I'm planning my boy's 10th birthday. I don't even know I can go. He lives in France, so I don't even know if I'll be able to go. It doesn't really matter. You know, we're planning it. It's great fun. Looking forward to it. I was messaging his mum today about it. So we're having a fantastic time. sort of, you know, and
you're going to enjoy it.
why would you avoid having a fantastic time like that because you're afraid you can't do it at some point in the future? That's bonkers.
Absolutely.
Now is when you need to get involved in life, not in the future, not in the past, but right here and now.
That's all we have, right? All we have is the here and now. This, you know, there's a chapter in the book about how much longer how long is this pandemic going to last? How much longer, you know, am I going to go through this suffering with my, you know, my loved one who's unwell? And the bottom line is nobody knows. And I was asking myself that question daily, and then I just thought, you know what, stop asking. Focus on today, focus on the now. That's all we have. And you know, and I get carers to write out lists of things.
Really interesting. I wonder what you think about this notion, because what's bringing to mind for me is this idea of acceptance. So, like, you know, Buddhist philosophy is very clear. It says life is pain, and you just go, hang on a minute, that can't be right. I don't want to think about that. But then when you actually think about it and then go into acceptance and stop trying to sort of manage something that you can't manage. If life is pain, well, what are you going to do about it is the question, because you can't sort out life. But what can you sort out? Well, me and my relationship to that thing. That's the thing I can sort out. And
it's choice. It's a choice. You can choose. You can choose that. You can either choose to focus on the negative, or, you know, continue to suffer, or go, do you know what, I'm bored.
So these are things, practical tools that you've learned and that you have to share with people. And you've got various resources available to them. I mean, how do people, you know, get hold of it? So the book, I guess they just, you know, we'll make sure there's a link. And they can buy it and stuff like that. But you do more than, it's not just a book and a sheet of paper. You actually help people directly, don't you? You have
I've been giving webinars of late. I will just share that there's a carers festival. I know you don't normally put those two words together, but it is happening this Saturday. I think it kicked off last year for the first time. Across London. I think anybody can join personally.
I'll just define yourself as the carer for the morning. Why not? Do you know the website for that?
Yes, so I've got. I'll give you the link on that.
Just tell us it now, and then James or Teresa or Jennifer will put it in.
Social media. It's not straightforward. It's on Eventbrite actually. So if anybody wants to Google Eventbrite and look for Carers Festival. It's starting this Saturday from 1 till 6.
If I can find it, come up with a Carers Festival. Let's have a go. Carers Festival.
I'll let you look it up. It's got live music, theatre, dance, poetry. There's another author, including myself. We're giving talks. I'm sharing my story, but then slides of parts of Carers Masterclass. So things to learn.
Carers Festival Online, part of Carers Week, is that right?
Is it on?
Carerscentre.org. Welcome to the Carers Festival Online 2020.
Yep, I think that must be it. A lot of charities have been sharing it out. It's by, they're called ADASS, is the logo. I can't remember what it stands for.
Yeah. Is that right?
No, I don't think it is. No.
Not that one. We'll find it.
We'll find it.
We'll make sure that people have it. And what else are you doing that people can get hold of you, and how they can get hold of more?
You go onto my website, so www.whocares4carers.com. They want to go on there. They can sign up. They get a free download the 5 top tips that every carer needs to know.
Which are?
Yes.
What are they?
Oh, what are the top tips?
Yeah, give me the 5 top tips. What are they?
Okay.
So you can remember them.
I've got loads actually. So the first one is gaining clarity actually.
Yeah.
So number one is checking in on yourself. You know, so it's bringing yourself. How are you feeling? So that's one of the things. I think we've been talking about them actually. The next one is about surrounding yourself with those who are. So that's number 2.
Top tip. Absolute top tip.
Which is
without
doubt. Number 3, take regular breaks. We've not talked about this too much, but I mean, even between chores, taking regular breaks throughout the day, 10 minutes here if it might be, or half an hour there, whatever it is.
Yeah.
give yourself time, give yourself permission to enjoy at least
Absolutely right.
a day. Otherwise,
is reset your body clock, all that sort of stuff.
Massively, because if you end up just doing this, just doing that,
yeah,
you'll just fall into bed worn out at the end of the day.
Yeah,
that's not how.
We call it workaholism. It's not healthy. It's not good. You don't want to go there, right?
And focus on the good stuff.
Yeah,
is one of the other things, it's about accepting change as well, accepting where we are. We can become quite frustrated. You can come up against it. I'm so angry, or, this family member's not helping me, or, this, you can come up against it and feel frustrated. And that can create all this anxiety. If you just sit down and just accept where you are now. And if you're sat right now and you're not in any pain and you're feeling okay, it's a good thing, just sit and just be in this moment, just accept where you are. A lot of us are coming up against that. And, also look at relaxation techniques. There's all sorts of things that we all like, different things. Some people loathe meditation or stuff like that. Taking yourself for a walk in nature, for example. Think about the things that you do enjoy, or things that you don't do at the moment that you'd like to do, carving that time out as well. And be kind to yourself is one of the big top tips as well on that, on the download. So, we can be our own worst enemy, and I certainly was. Be your best friend. Be really kind to you.
And people, not individuals, but organisations and groups, can ask you to come in and present around these issues and do webinars. Absolutely.
I do webinars.
Online training as well, I believe.
I do online training. So I'm with Curo Carers, CURO. They're a new charity going into workplaces, obviously virtually at the moment. Just today we did one for Edwards, carers in the workplace. Supporting carers actually then supports business, funnily enough, because if you're making sure they're okay, keeping checks on them, it's keeping them healthier. It makes them feel better. They feel that people do care and do have compassion, and it's not leaving them at crisis point where they just end up having to leave a job and that's it. So that went really well the other day. So it's going in. We give live webinars and it's a pilot scheme that Curo are running. So allowing those carers to check in digitally and just with a team of experts behind the scenes, doctors, financial advisors, etc., so that they can text or whatever if they're struggling, because it's really multitasking when you're caring and working and you've got all other things going on. It is a proper mind spin. So so that's going on. All sorts of things. So with charities.
And what about your future plans?
For me, I'm still a graphic designer, but my thoughts and my intention is really going towards the caring sector and helping those in caring. 3 in 5 of us will be a carer at some point in our lives, and of course, as an aging population, that's happening, and it's still too many of us are falling ill. That needs to change, and that's where my position is on that. So I'm going to write another book, which is going to be my story with plenty of black comedy in that, Noel. It's all. Whereas this book is it's about positivity, enriching your own life, being kind to you. It's going to be warts and all, basically, but a lot of the funny stuff as well, because Neil was a comedy act as well, so it was really good. And getting Carers Masterclass out online. So if anybody wants to sign up on my website, whocaresforcarers.com, sign up on that. I'll let you know when it's ready. I'm just getting my head around the platforms and things like that. There's so much to deal with when you're it's like, I'd like to just do it now. I could do it now, but there's lots more things that you have to deal with to get the show on the road, which I'm sure you're fully aware of, Noel. So
I just give up on a regular basis. That's one of my top tips. Just give up on a regular basis and
I just give up.
Have a cup of tea or something like that.
Sit down.
Get a cup of tea.
Let somebody else do it.
Sit in a corner and be a sort of quivering jelly. That's probably the best way to do this stuff.
So that's it. And I'm also involved with like a co-production group for like Richmond Council, things like that. So I am involved with councils at the time. So giving my tuppence worth on the board on those from a carer's perspective.
You need that voice. I mean, it is such a joy to have you on. It's a great story that you got of change and transformation. And, you know, if people are out there struggling, you know, it can get better. If you have been triggered by these stories and by thinking about if you're in the middle of it now, I just do want to say we will put some helpline numbers. What would you suggest as sort of helpline groups, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I am going to give a helpline number right now. Carers UK, I do love their website. It's very proactive, very on the money. So I'm going to give a number now. So if you are struggling, or you know you need more support, you're not sure how to turn to, ring this number: 0808 808 7777.
So read that out again.
Yeah, 0808 808 7777.
And James or Teresa will put that in the...
Yeah, and then there's, if you just go to if you Google Carers UK, it'll come up straight away. Their helpline is on from 9 till 6 in the day. Yeah. Ask for a carers assessment from your local carers centre if you haven't had one. Do ring, you know, even though charities have closed their doors and we're not meeting each other face to face, still doing things virtually online.
Absolutely, without doubt, all the services.
I think of Richmond Carers Centre, I'm involved with still, or Talk Carers Masterclass. They have had a mindfulness course going on weekly. Really beneficial, and people checking in, and I take a Mind Body Spirit group, for example, for INS, neuro charity in Twickenham, and people log on, and we, you know, there's lots of things people are doing and charities are doing. So don't feel that, don't accept if you're in that place of being stuck behind closed doors thinking, oh, this is it. No, it's not it at all. Put the feelers out. That's a really big one. Put the feelers out. Find out who is out there. Ask other carers. Find out what's going on. There is still, charities are doing great work and offering great support.
So what we say in my profession is get engaged in what we call help-seeking behaviour, and don't stop till you get the help. So ask for help, get the help, and just keep on asking for it wherever you go. So help-seeking behaviour is what will save your ass, people. It really will, in every sort of situation. We have to come to the end. It's been wonderful to have you on, Sarah. It's an extraordinary story and extraordinary work that you continue to do. So, you know, thank you for that. We have to finish now, unfortunately, folks. It's been a fantastic show. I actually do remember who's on next week, oddly enough. This is a first in the history of this program that I have, my brain is clear enough to actually remember who's on. Next week, we've got a guy called Richmond Stace, who's a physiotherapist who specialises in pain and looking at how we deal with pain from a sort of physiotherapy perspective. So by not using drugs, essentially.
Great.
Because pain management is really, really complicated stuff in terms of the drugs that are available. Richard's a really good guy. I've known him for many years, which is maybe why I remember he's on, but there you go. So look forward to that next week. Wonderful to have everybody here with us this evening. The helpline numbers were there, so don't worry if you can't remember them. But if you are struggling, reach out for help. There are people there who care in that way that will be helpful. I'm going to say goodbye for now. Thank you all for joining us.